They called it a violation. But I called it my daughter's only chance to breathe like a normal child. It was a quiet Tuesday morning when I first received the letter. The kind of silence that doesn't warn you before it breaks everything. My daughter, Emily, had just rolled down the ramp we built together, the same ramp they now labeled as unauthorized construction. But to me, it wasn't just wooden bolts. It was freedom in its purest form. A sacred bridge between her and the life she lost. Emily didn't complain when the doctor said she'd never walk again. She didn't scream when the needles pierced her skin. She didn't even cry when she watched her schoolmates run across the playground without her. But she did smile. The first time her wheels touched that ramp and the sun hit her face. That smile, it made every sleepless night worth it. Every ache in my back. Every bead of sweat that fell onto that wood. And then the HOA arrived. Not in person, of course. They never face you directly. They come as envelopes. Signatures. Guidelines written by people who forgot how to feel. They said the ramp disrupted the aesthetic. They said it ruined the uniformity of the neighborhood. They said it wasn't in harmony with the environment. But what they really meant was, it made them uncomfortable to be reminded that not every child can run. That some fathers have to fight wars, even after coming home. I tried to reason. I appealed to their humanity. I wrote letters, shared Emily's story, even offered for them to come visit us. But silence can be more cruel than words. Days passed. Then came the contractors. Men with hammers, drills, and blank eyes. They didn't build. They removed, erased, followed orders without question. But they didn't know what I was made of. They didn't see the storm buried beneath the calm of a quiet man. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." I stood still that day. Didn't raise my voice. Didn't curse. Didn't threaten. I just stood between my daughter's ramp and their destruction. Like a wall made of willpower and blood-bound purpose. They didn't touch it. Not that day. But wars aren't fought in a single moment. And those who believe in control never stop pressing. That night, I sat beside Emily as she fell asleep. She asked me why some people don't like our house anymore. I couldn't answer her. Not yet. But deep inside, I knew. They weren't just trying to take away wood and nails. They were trying to break a spirit, hers and mine. So I decided, if they wanted a fight, they'd get one. Not of fists, not of fire, but of quiet resolve. I would make them feel what she felt. I would make them crawl, not out of revenge, but so they could understand what it means to rise. From the ground. From the pain. From the place where most people break, but where the few become unshakable. This wasn't about the ramp anymore. This was about reminding them that some men don't yield, that some fathers don't forget, and that some storms wear a calm face until they're provoked. Chapter 1 ended not with victory, but with stillness. The kind that comes before the earth trembles. The morning after they sent the contractors, I stood in silence. The ramp still stood, untouched, like a monument. Not to rebellion, not even to defiance, but to love, to dignity. But I knew they weren't finished. Men like them, the ones who hide behind regulations, they don't understand silence unless it's their own. They see compassion as weakness, kindness as surrender. And that's where they always make their mistake. Because still waters are not weak. They are patient. And patience is the deadliest weapon ever wielded by a father with nothing left to lose. By noon, Linda, the HOA president, had filed a formal complaint with the city. The words were sterile, mechanical, non-compliant addition, community disruption, refusal to cooperate with regulatory standards. But every sentence reeked of something deeper, something colder. resentment, discomfort, control. She wasn't just trying to erase a ramp. She was trying to erase the proof that someone in her perfect little world needed help. That someone had dared to suffer, visibly. That someone had survived. And survival, to people like Linda, is always offensive when it isn't beautiful. I didn't react. No social media post. No threats. No gathering of torches and neighbors. I simply walked to City Hall, documents in hand. Pictures of Emily feeding the birds. A doctor's note. A silent testimony of what it meant to lose mobility, and how one slope of wood gave it back. I left the file on the counter and walked out without saying a word. That evening, they sent someone to inspect the ramp. Not the city. Not someone who cared. Just another HOA board member. He didn't even knock. He took photos from the sidewalk. Looked at me like I was diseased. Like Emily's chair was contagious. But I didn't look away. Because sometimes you don't need to speak to make your point. Sometimes silence is the sharpest knife in the drawer. 3 days passed. Then came the letter. Demolition scheduled. No appeal. No hearing. Just a date and a time. Next Monday. 8 a.m. They thought I'd panic. Beg. Break. Instead, I smiled. Because they were about to learn something no policy manual could ever teach. There's a part of every man that remains buried until injustice digs it up. They called it demolition. I called it war. That Sunday night, I didn't sleep. Not out of fear. Out of calculation. By morning, I'd made my decision. Not to stop them. Not to fight them. But to teach them. Emily was up early. She didn't understand why I looked so calm. I helped her down the ramp. She didn't notice the small GoPro camera I'd mounted on the porch rail. Or the second one on the mailbox. She just smiled and rolled toward the grass like she always did. At 8:03 a.m., the HOA arrived. Linda, standing at a distance like a queen inspecting her peasants. 2 new contractors stepped out. This time, not hesitant. They had orders. And orders make cowards brave. I stepped out holding 2 coffee mugs, one for me, one for Emily. I said nothing. The lead contractor placed his hand on the first railing. Emily looked up. "Dad?" she asked softly. I nodded. "It's okay, baby. Let them try." And they did. They pulled, hammered, cut. But this time, I had done more than build a ramp. I had filed a formal ADA complaint. I had sent a press release to 5 local news stations. I had spoken with a disability rights attorney. And the cameras were rolling. Neighbors began to come outside. Phones out. Whispers. Tension thick enough to cut. One mother stood across the street in tears. A retired Marine saluted me silently from his porch. And Linda, she noticed. Her expression shifted. The realization crawled slowly across her face. They weren't winning. They were exposing themselves. By 8:27 a.m., the first news van arrived. By 8:35, the contractors had packed up. Linda tried to approach me, words caught between pride and panic. I didn't give her the honor of eye contact. I just sipped my coffee and turned my back. That night, the HOA board called an emergency meeting. By morning, I received a new letter. Due to recent developments and in light of community feedback, the ramp will be allowed to remain. We regret any distress caused. Regret? No. They didn't regret the act. They regretted being caught. But I didn't do this for regret. I did it to protect the one thing more sacred than rules, my daughter's right to live fully, without shame. Emily smiled that evening, unaware of the battle that had raged around her. But I knew. And I also knew. It wasn't over. Because people like Linda, they don't crawl easily. But the ground teaches what the sky never can. And I was just getting started. They weren't done. People like Linda never are. They don't take defeat. They swallow it, grind it in their teeth, and wait for the next move. 3 weeks of silence passed. The ramp remained. Emily rolled down every morning with joy in her chest and sunlight on her face. But silence, I've learned, is never peace. It's the inhale before the next blow. And I could feel it coming, like the slow shift in air before a storm breaks the sky open. The new letter wasn't from the HOA. It came in a beige envelope. No logo. No smile. Just a law firm's name, printed in small, sharp font. Peterson and Doyle, attorneys at law. I opened it slowly. Read it once. Then again. They were suing me. The claim? Violation of community standards. Reduction of neighborhood property values. And the most absurd line of all. Intentional defamation of the HOA through recorded media. They were using the very footage of their shame as a weapon. Stoic men are taught not to be surprised by human pettiness. Seneca said, "You want to live happily? Live in ignorance of many things, and forgiveness of many more." But this wasn't a matter for ignorance, and I owed them no forgiveness. They had declared war in ink. So I prepared not just to defend, but to leave scars. I didn't run to social media, didn't rant, didn't beg. I visited my lawyer, an old friend from the Corps. Not a man of many words, just the right ones. He read the letter, set it down, and said, "They just handed you the sword." Because now, the fight wasn't about Emily. It was about every family in that neighborhood. Every parent who had swallowed HOA rules in silence. Every disabled child who'd been hidden behind curtains because the world couldn't handle their difference. We filed a counterclaim. Under ADA protections. Under emotional distress. Under equal access rights. Then, we filed a motion to make it a public hearing. Linda didn't see that coming. She thought she had pulled the strings. Instead, she had pulled back the curtain, and the whole neighborhood saw the puppeteer with blood on her hands. Court day arrived. I wore the same shirt I'd worn the night Emily was born. The one with the coffee stain on the sleeve, the one she used to grab when she learned how to reach up. She came with me, in her chair, hair braided, eyes full of innocence and iron. When the judge asked me to speak, I didn't come with outrage. I came with truth. I told him about the tumor, about the ramp, about the smiles and the sorrow, about the morning she couldn't leave the house because the stairs had become her cage. I didn't raise my voice, didn't dramatize. Just facts, steady and sharp as steel. And then I played the footage. The contractor ripping at wood. Emily watching in confusion. Linda standing like a statue carved from ice. Gasps filled the courtroom. And when the final image paused, Emily feeding the birds at the base of that ramp, there was silence. Not from shock, but from truth recognized. The HOA's lawyer spoke. Policies, structures, community rights. But it all felt like dust after stone. The judge ruled. Ramp stays. HOA fined. Legal costs transferred to their budget. And the best part? A mandatory ADA review of the entire community infrastructure. Linda didn't speak when the gavel fell. She didn't look at me. But I looked at her. Not with anger. With legacy. Because she hadn't just lost a case. She had awakened something older than her petty rules. Older than paper. Older than power. She had awakened a father's vow. That his child would never be less. Never be hidden. Never be broken because someone else preferred comfort over compassion. We left the courtroom in silence. But that silence wasn't weakness anymore. It was victory. It was history being written. One ramp, one daughter, one fight at a time. The courtroom victory wasn't the end. It was only the fracture in the foundation. And foundations, once cracked, don't hold. The neighborhood changed. Not loudly. Not all at once. But slowly, like leaves shifting before autumn sets in. People who once waved from a distance now nodded with weight in their eyes. They didn't speak of the case. But I could see it. The shift. The shame. The silent recognition. They had watched. They had known. And for too long, they had said nothing. Now, their silence had sides. Linda tried to restore order. Tried to send out a cheery HOA newsletter like nothing had happened. Tried to smile wider at Sunday strolls, wave harder at mailboxes. But her smile no longer reached her eyes. And the air around her, once crisp with control, now carried something else. Doubt. And the whisper of consequence. One morning, I stepped out to get the paper. Emily was by the window, tracing raindrops with her fingers. A woman stood by our fence. Older. Quiet. She didn't speak right away. Just stared at the ramp. "I'm sorry," she said finally. Her voice trembled, but her eyes held. "My grandson, he's autistic. When we moved in, Linda told me to keep his toys off the porch. Said they were too bright. I stayed quiet. I shouldn't have." I nodded. No bitterness. No pride. Just understanding. One by one, stories began to surface. A retired teacher who was fined for planting wildflowers. A young couple forced to repaint their home 3 times because the shade was 2% off code. A widow whose wind chimes had been removed without notice because someone complained they were too mournful. They had all bowed. But now they began to rise. It started with a petition, then a call for a board meeting. Then whispers turned to voices, and voices turned to votes. Linda didn't go quietly. Tried to play the victim. Tried to invoke tradition, order, legacy. But no one listened anymore. Because real legacy doesn't come from rulebooks. It comes from doing what's right when it costs you everything. The vote was unanimous. She was removed. Her seat, once seen as untouchable, now sat empty under a flickering fluorescent light in the community hall. The woman who ruled with fear now avoided the park she once micromanaged. The woman who demanded uniformity now walked alone. I didn't attend the meeting. I didn't need to. Stoics don't celebrate the fall of others. We observe it with clarity, with humility, and with a quiet warning inside us. Power gained without virtue will always return to dust. A few weeks later, the new board approached me, offered an apology, offered a seat. I declined, not because I didn't care, but because I had already fought the battle that mattered. The ramp stayed. Emily stayed free. And the message stayed louder than any rulebook ever written. We don't kneel to injustice. We teach it to kneel before truth. That's the Stoic way. Not loud. Not flashy. Just unbreakable. Like stone beneath storms. Like a father's love. Like a child's right to rise. Time moved. As it always does. The storm passed. The dust settled. But something lingered. Not tension. Not memory. Something quieter. Something that grows only when pain has been faced with dignity, respect. Not the kind that's given out of fear, but the kind that's earned in silence. When a man refuses to kneel, the ramp still stood, unpainted, unchanged. It creaked sometimes when Emily rolled down it, like it was alive. Like it remembered every fight, every footstep, every word that had been spoken in its defense. But now, that creak wasn't a cry. It was a testament. One afternoon, Emily came home from school, holding something in her hands. A drawing. Crayons on rough paper. A house. A ramp. a stick-figure girl with a big smile. At the top, written in crooked, wobbly letters, "This is me, and this is how I fly." It wasn't Emily's handwriting. I looked at her. She smiled. "Her name's Layla. She's in 2nd grade. She just got her chair this summer. I told her it's not scary if you have a ramp. I showed her mine." I swallowed hard. Not out of grief. Out of something deeper. Legacy had begun. That week, a letter arrived. Not a demand. Not a threat. An invitation. From a local disability advocacy group. They wanted Emily and me to speak at their annual fundraiser. I said no at first. I'm not a speaker. I'm a builder. A protector. A man of few, deliberate words. But Emily asked me gently, "Dad, maybe someone out there needs a ramp too. But they don't have a you." So I went. The hall wasn't big. Just folding chairs and warm coffee and tired faces. Faces that had been told no too many times. That had learned to survive in silence. I stood there, hands rough, voice steady. I didn't talk about HOA codes. I talked about love. About duty. About what it means to hold the line, not with fists, but with principles. And when I finished, no one clapped right away. They just looked. That look, the one that says, "You said what I couldn't. You did what I didn't know I was allowed to." Afterward, an old man with shaking hands approached me. Vietnam vet. Cried as he hugged me. Said his grandson now had a ramp because of what we did. Said he built it with the same hammer he used to repair his first home in 1974. Legacy, I realized, is not built by grand speeches. It's built one plank at a time. One story at a time. One child at a time who learns they are not weak, just waiting to rise. A few weeks later, Emily's school installed its first ever outdoor mobility ramp. No debate. No protest. No committee. Just action. No plaque was needed. But someone placed a small stone at the base of it anyway. It read, "For the girl who taught us to see." I never asked who left it. Because it didn't matter. Truth doesn't need credit. It just needs to be lived. And as for me, I kept living. Quietly. Firmly. Not for glory. Not for applause. But for her. Because in this world of shallow crowns and noisy victories, I found my purpose in something far more enduring. Not to fight, but to build. Not to punish, but to protect. Not to rule, but to rise and to raise. And if one day Emily forgets the war, but remembers the ramp, and what it meant to stand tall even while sitting low, years passed. Like wind across an old fence, soft but certain. The neighborhood changed. Faces left. New ones came. Laws were updated. Fences repainted. But the ramp, it never moved. It stood through rain, snow, and time. It aged, but never bowed. A quiet monument to a moment when one father said, "No more." Emily grew. Her hair darkened. Her voice deepened. She learned to code, then to paint. She read Marcus Aurelius before bed. Not because I told her to, but because she understood what it meant to carry storms inside and still choose peace. She never once called herself disabled. She called herself designed differently. And that difference became her fire. She left for college, the same way she did everything, with calm, with clarity, with purpose. She rolled into a world that once tried to erase her, and began to leave marks they could never scrub out. I visited her campus once. Unannounced. A surprise. And there it was. Not one, but 3 ramps. Smooth. Solid. Made of stone and steel. She met me at the door. Wearing that same grin, the one she gave me the day I first carried her down our old porch. "Dad," she said, I helped design them. I didn't speak. Didn't need to. The truth was already flooding the space between us. She didn't just survive. She transformed. She had become the very thing I once fought for. A builder of bridges. A remover of walls. A ramp, in human form, lifting others, quietly, without asking for anything in return. There was a boy beside her. Nervous hands, uneven gait. He limped as he approached. "This is Kian," she said. "He's starting a club here for accessibility design. I told him he doesn't need permission, just purpose." He smiled at me shyly. Then he looked at Emily like she was light itself. And in that look, I saw it. The same look I had given her mother when Emily was born. Hope. Not the kind you wish for, the kind you follow. We had coffee. Talked about nothing and everything. When I left, I walked past one of the ramps and placed my hand on the rail. It was smooth. Cool. But I felt something more. Echoes. Of nails driven by a younger version of me. Of tears I refused to cry. Of a voice that had once shaken in court, but now echoed in architecture. Legacy doesn't ask for attention. It just repeats, silently, in those who were once lifted, now lifting others. On the flight home, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Because Emily wasn't behind me anymore. She was ahead. Out in the world. A ramp where others saw only walls. A flame that warmed, never burned. A stoic not by blood, but by fire. And somewhere, deep in the silence of the clouds, I whispered the only prayer a father like me ever needs. Now is the time for each of us to rise. The values, the courage, the wisdom passed down through generations still teach us how to live with honor. Never see yourself as weak in the face of injustice. Make your strength and reason your greatest weapons. If this story touched you, like and share this video with those who fight for courage and justice every day. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel, because here, every story holds a lesson, a truth that can transform you from within. Remember, true power does not come from the world outside. It comes from the fire burning inside your soul. Together, we will build a society where justice and respect are not privileges, but rights for all. So prepare yourself to awaken that inner strength and to write your own story until you become the master of your fate. No one will ever grant you your due. Stay with us and make your life a legacy